Bannon and what he said in a book and what he's saying now, I wouldn't exactly count it as an apology, maybe not even a mea culpa, just basically Steve Bannon saying this is what I meant and this is who I was talking about when he made those comments that were published in the new Michael Wolff book, Fire and Fury. Steve Bannon, in a statement to Fox News, talking about that meeting that Donald Trump Jr. had with a Russian attorney that was described by Bannon in the book as being treasonous. Bannon now saying, quote, Donald Trump Jr. is both a patriot and a good man. He has been relentless in his advocacy for his father and the agenda that has helped turn our country around. But at the same time, Bannon did not deny saying that the meeting was treasonous, telling Fox News, quote, my comments about the meeting with Russian nationals came from my life experiences as a naval officer stationed aboard a destroyer whose main mission was to hunt Soviet submarines, to my time at the Pentagon during the Reagan years when our focus was the defeat of the evil empire. But Bannon not faulting Donald Trump Jr., pointing fingers instead at the president's then campaign manager, Paul Manafort, who was also there, saying, quote, my comments were aimed at Paul Manafort, a seasoned campaign professional with experience and knowledge of how the Russians operate. He should have known they are duplicitous, cunning, and not our friends. To reiterate, those comments were not aimed at Don Jr. Bannon did say sorry to the president, kind of in a way, tweeting, quote, I regret that my delay in responding to the inaccurate reporting regarding Don Jr. has diverted attention from the president's historical accomplishments for the first year of his presidency. The president spent part of his weekend, the retreat at Camp David, focused on responding to this book and some of the other allegations contained within it, including allegations that he's not stable enough mentally to execute the job of the presidency or to understand the big issues facing him. The president tweeting on Saturday, quote, I went from very successful businessman to top TV star to president of the United States on my first try. I think that would qualify as not smart, but genius, and a very stable genius at that. Administration officials took to the airwaves on Sunday to defend their boss. Here's CIA Director Mike Pompeo talking to Chris Wallace.
Those statements are just absurd, Chris. I mean, just pure fantasy. The president is engaged. He understands the complexity. He asks really difficult questions of our team at CIA so that we can provide him the information that he needs to make good informed policy decisions. Statements like the one Mr. Wolff made about how we all think about the president, they're just ridiculous on their face.
The president has so far refrained from any comment on the Wolff book Fire and Fury so far today. He'd rather focus on policy. He's going to Nashville this afternoon to become the first sitting president in 25 years to talk with the Farm Bureau Federation Convention. He'll be giving a speech this afternoon on agricultural and trade policy. And then he heads down to Atlanta, Georgia to watch the face-off between the Georgia Bulldogs and the Crimson Tide. John?
But the day is still young, John.
It is. It's only 11 o'clock, John.
All right.
There's plenty of time left to go.
We'll be watching the Twitter. All right. Thanks, John Roberts at the White House.
All right, on Capitol Hill, House lawmakers are back from their holiday break with their work cut out for them as they also look ahead to the November midterms, which could impact their agenda. Here's Karl Rove.
How much trouble are Republicans in as they head towards the midterm in 2018 in November?
Big trouble. The president's approval rating is in the high 30s, and the Republicans are 24 seats in the House away from losing their majorities. There's always a bit of tension between the House and the Senate. This year, the House Republicans are going to use that tension creatively in order to say, we're working, they aren't, vote for me, your Republican congressman, and the Senate can go to heck.
Joining us now is James Hohmann. He is author of The Daily 202, national political correspondent for The Washington Post. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. What do you think of Karl Rove's analysis there?
I think it's spot on, Melissa. He's absolutely right, both in the fact that the House and the Senate are in play, and also the idea that Republicans in the House are going to try and creatively come up with wedge issues to force vulnerable Democratic incumbents to take difficult votes. It's a lot harder to get things through the Senate. Remember, they have the filibuster rule, so they need 60 votes to get anything done. And after the loss in Alabama, they only have 51 votes. With 2 senators sick, they really only have 49 votes they can count on. So it's going to be hard to pass big ticket things through the Senate, but Paul Ryan over in the House can put some points on the board, give his vulnerable Republican incumbents things that they can go back home to their districts and say, here, we tried to pass this. We would have passed this into law if only the Senate would fall in line.
The strategy, as he seemed to lay it out, was that Republicans in the House and the Senate and the president can work together in lockstep now. And then the House, members of the House can do extra stuff on the side that they say, you know, we did this great thing. It would have worked great. We handed it over to the Senate. They didn't do anything with it. They say that a lot. That could work if everyone sticks to the plan, but they have a habit of not doing that.
You're right, Melissa. And this was the big topic at Camp David this weekend. President Trump was there with the Republican leaders of the House and Senate. And Mitch McConnell is going to these guys and he's saying, look, I know Paul Ryan wants to tackle entitlement reform. That's one of his big lifelong legacy items, but that's going to put some of our members in a really tough spot. We're not going to take it up. Please don't make this the big priority. So McConnell urging his Republican colleagues in the House and at the White House saying, focus on infrastructure and immigration. Those are areas where we can actually win and get some real achievements.
Okay, so I'm glad you brought up Camp David because I'm one of those people that's suspicious of conspiracies everywhere. So I sort of look out and think, you know, as the president headed to Camp David, could Steve Bannon have been sort of a sacrificial lamb? That we're throwing him off, you know, after the disaster in Alabama and everything. Now we're all coming together in a more moderate position. Let's all work together. Kumbaya. What do you think?
I don't think that's a conspiracy theory at all. I think you're dead right. And I think that the McConnell couldn't be happier. Right. The people close to the leader are thrilled. They really hope, you know, that this means that there's not going to be the kinds of divisive primaries that there might have been in Arizona and Nevada and Wisconsin and elsewhere. And it is, if Republicans can avoid some of these really nasty, devastating primary fights, their odds of holding the House and the Senate really do go up.
Yeah, the timing of the book and the whole thing is a little too convenient for me. I feel like there are people behind the scenes working all this, more to that, of getting rid of Bannon, but that's a subject for another time. Talking about issues, because that's what really counts. What do you think gets done in this moment of trying to work together? Is there a deal that's DACA and the border, or is it infrastructure? What do you think could actually get done?
Well, so I think something's going to happen on immigration. It's both sides think that they have leverage, that they're in a good negotiating position. Republicans feel like Democrats are desperate to prevent the deportation of all these people who were brought here as undocumented minors. Democrats feel like Republicans are going to end up kind of caving to get their votes, that Trump's not actually going to get any money for his border wall. So I think that there has to be something that gets done, but both sides kind of still feel like they're in a good negotiating position. They have to pass something by next Friday to avoid another government shutdown. I think they're going to end up kicking the can down the road a week or two, not something big and substantive. So anyway, I think that there's going to be some movement on immigration. Infrastructure is harder than it sounds. It should be so easy. Let's spend money to fix our crumbling infrastructure. There's contradictory information coming out about what exactly the plan is going to be. I think some conservatives want to do public-private partnerships so the government doesn't have to go into as much debt to kind of jumpstart some of these projects. And Trump at the Camp David meeting was saying, no, I don't think that approach is going to work. We really have to actually spend government money to do this. There are deficit hawks in the House and Senate who really don't want to spend $1 trillion on what might be another stimulus package. But that said, I think there's 10 Democratic senators who are up for re-election this year in states President Trump carried in 2016, and they're going to feel a lot of pressure on something like infrastructure to get on board. And I think that's why I feel somewhat confident something, even if it's a relatively small package, can pass. Exactly.
Right. James Hohmann, thank you for your insight this morning. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks, Melissa.
A Taliban hostage freed after years in captivity, in court for a bail hearing now. Joshua Boyle, rescued by Pakistani forces last October. He's facing multiple charges in Canada, including sexual assault. That story in a moment. Plus, President Trump firing back on Twitter at critics questioning his fitness for office. How his closest advisors are defending him next.
He didn't become the president by accident. And as much as everyone wants to talk about stability, was he unstable when he passed the tax reform? Was he unstable when we finally hit back at Syria and said no more chemical weapons? Was he unstable when we finally put North Korea on notice?
Well, the media is all over that new tell-all book on the Trump White House, attacking the president and now questioning his fitness for office. And President Trump is fighting back, tweeting this over the weekend. Actually, throughout my life, my two greatest assets have been mental stability and being, like, really smart. Crooked Hillary Clinton also played these cards very hard and, as everyone knows, went down in flames. This tweet was all the buzz on the Sunday morning shows.
And put out that tweet, stable genius. It's kind of like Richard Nixon, I'm not a crook.
In a normal presidency, you wouldn't send the president out to attest to his own mental stability and brilliance. But this isn't, as we know, a normal presidency or a normal White House, and he does what he wants to do.
It seems to me we have a situation here where, on the one hand, you have the accounts in this book, which would, if it were true and there were questions inside the administration about the president's ability to perform his office, that it would put a duty on those working around him to speak up. And then on the other side, you have what could be a fundamental smear against democracy, which is to say the fitness of the president. This isn't just some political critique. This is about whether he can perform, which goes to the heart of what's going on.
We heard earlier in the hour, Mike Pompeo, the CIA director, then went on to defend the president and his fitness for office. Let's bring in our panel. Joe Concha is media reporter at The Hill, and Judy Miller, Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist and Fox News contributor. This new book has just sent the media into, well, I guess a Twitter. I mean, they are just all over this. And you do have to say, I mean, you cannot win the presidency of the United States without having some smarts.
Well, yes. I mean, he's either crazy, as his critics would say, or President Trump is crazy like a fox, as his defenders say, and as the American Thinker wrote over the weekend. Look, there's no doubt that President Trump is very unusual and has some very peculiar traits, most of which were chronicled by Michael Wolff. And then you have Dr. Bandy Lee, who did a kind of long-distance diagnosis of the president, who also said that the president is unraveling, that there are signs of it already. All of these things have fed this meme of Trump's idiosyncrasy being more than idiosyncrasy. But, you know, journalists are not good prognosticators, and we are even worse psychiatrists, and we shouldn't be in that business.
I was going to say very few of them have degrees in that field. Go ahead, Joe.
And ones that do have degrees, and Judy just said it, long-distance analysis. Boy, I've never heard that quite done successfully
Diagnosis.
before. But here's the deal. President Trump has been a public figure for nearly 4 decades. He has acted this way when he was an incredibly successful real estate mogul. He did when he was campaigning last year, which was the most scrutinized, watched campaign we have ever seen. And he became a duly elected president. So yes, his communication style is unorthodox. But I think the problem is many people in this industry are taking that unorthodox approach and then trying to connect that to the 25th Amendment, which is to remove a president based on his mental stability. So look, he's unconventional. We get that completely, but we can't use that as an excuse to say that he's mentally unfit.
Yeah, there are demands of the office that a lot of people assume that, you know, the president is sort of holding Twitter out there as a shiny object and baiting his critics, his enemies, if you will, by putting out some of the tweets that he puts out, while behind the scenes he is appointing Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court, for instance.
Right. That's the crazy like a fox hypothesis. The problem is, in a nuclear age, if someone does exhibit signs of mental instability, that should be a legitimate source of concern to people. And we have had previous instances, as we now know, only in retrospect. For example, President Reagan, who performed admirably and magnificently, some would say, in the job, who was also suffering from Alzheimer's, apparently while he was still in office. So there are questions. You know, the president has a physical coming up on January 12th. Why not release the results of it? And that might put to rest some of these allegations.
And a lot of people in this business are going too far. Joe Scarborough, MSNBC, tweeted out today that the Washington Post had actually turned him down twice to write an op-ed to argue that the president is suffering from onset dementia, early onset dementia. How does Joe Scarborough know this exactly from New York? He says it came from a source. Unless that source is the president's doctor, then we can't go ahead with this. The bottom line is, John, that Pew did an end of the year analysis of President Trump's coverage. He only gets 5% positive coverage, while President Obama received 20% negative coverage.
Yeah.
Think of that. So anybody who says there's no bias in media, I think that pretty much puts it to rest.
If you want the press to like you, try not attacking us day and night. I mean, there's no reason why.
But your personal feelings, Judy, shouldn't get in the way. No, personal feelings shouldn't get in the way.
Well,
follow the facts.
But
follow the facts. Don't worry about if the president's attacking you. Sorry.
As the president tweeted over the weekend, he wrote, "I've had to put up with the fake news from the first day I announced that I would be running for president. Now I have to put up with a fake book written by a totally discredited author. Ronald Reagan had the same problem and handled it well. So will I." That's alluding to the questions, I guess, about the possibility of Alzheimer's during, especially during Reagan's second term. But there you have it. I mean, fake news. The president is at war with the media.
Absolutely. And his war on the media definitely has consequences, and you see them at moments like this. But when you read Michael Wolff's book, as I did over the weekend, started to do online over the weekend, it's filled with things that really would make people wonder what's going on in the White House.
Things? What kind of things?
Well,
things that weren't fact-checked, for instance?
No, Axios, for example, got, and I'm not even now referring to Michael Wolff's book. I'm talking about Michael Wolff's report that he goes to bed at 6:30 if he can with some, a McDonald's. And that's not normal behavior.
Who cares?
Wait, no.
We are treating gossip as gospel now. Michael Wolff has been known over the years, over decades, for being allergic to fact-checking, where he has been contradicted about his reporting from people who said they weren't even in places they said they were. Michael Berman from Washington Post was supposedly at the Four Seasons in this book about some sort of big meeting, and then Michael Berman said, "My kid was being born that day. I wasn't there. This was somebody else." And I can give dozens of examples of this book being simply gossip. I'm not saying all of it, particularly the start parts about Steve Bannon, but this book should not be taken seriously. I'm sorry.
All right.
I think it's going to be taken seriously, whether or not we like it.
Depending on how you vote.
The president is unhappy about it, that's for sure. Joe Concha, Judy Miller, thank you. Melissa.
A big night at the Golden Globes as the stars wore black in a statement against sexual harassment in Hollywood. And then there was Oprah. We are live with the details. Plus, fire breaks out over at Trump Tower. What we know about the cause and how it was detected.
The Secret Service that were monitoring the building noticed the smoke coming from the roof, and they called the fire safety director in the lobby. And by checking the cameras throughout the building, he did say we had flames coming out of a vent on the top of the building.
Well, things are getting back to normal right now at Trump Tower in New York City after a fire on the top floor had smoke billowing from the roof. And the fire department says there were 3 minor injuries, 2 civilians, 1 firefighter.
The fire wasn't in the building, it was on top of the building. We had flames coming out of those vents. Again, it did not have no smoke condition, no fire inside the building.
That high-rise building on New York's Fifth Avenue is home to the president's penthouse, other luxury apartments, and business offices. The president's son, Eric, tweeting his thanks to firefighters for doing a, quote, incredible job.
Hollywood's awards season kicking off last night, and the red carpet turned black at the Golden Globes, with stars denouncing sexual harassment and supporting the Me Too movement by wearing black dresses. Disgraced producer Harvey Weinstein was not there, but he did get a mention in Seth Meyers' opening monologue. William Longinus is live in Los Angeles with more. William.
Well, Melissa, remember 2 years ago, Hollywood was too white. Last year, the industry went after President Trump. This year's award show wasn't about scorning men, but promoting women. The red carpet, as you said, looked more like a funeral as everyone wore black to protest gender inequality, injustice, and sexual harassment in the workplace.
Many of us were taught not to tattle. It was a culture of silencing, and that was normalized. I urge all of us to not only support survivors and bystanders who are brave enough to tell their truth, but to promote restorative justice.
So everyone got on the bandwagon, yet none bothered to mention or even joke how Hollywood itself, including many there, accepted, promoted, and personified a sexist culture for decades. But dozens of the directors and producers who have been accused of misconduct, only 2 were vilified by name: Harvey Weinstein and Kevin Spacey.
For the male nominees in the room tonight, this is the first time in 3 months it won't be terrifying to hear your name read out loud. Harvey Weinstein isn't here tonight because, well, I've heard rumors that he's crazy and difficult to work with.
Hosted by the 98 members of the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, the Globes honored Oprah Winfrey, who delivered what many saw as a political speech.
For too long, women have not been heard or believed if they dared to speak their truth to the power of those men. But their time is up.
Oprah inspired the crowd. Her longtime partner later said that she would run for president if, quote, that's what the people wanted. Winfrey has star power, obviously, and charisma, but would America elect another celebrity with no political experience? Melissa, what do you think about that? And I will say that NBC, hey, you know, I got to say this because NBC did run a tweet last night that said, we have nothing respect for our future president. They had to delete that because it apparently was put out there by a third party. Back to you.
Yeah, and that was under Oprah Winfrey, so they were implying that she was our future president. I mean, that would talk about 2 master marketers between Oprah and the current president. It would certainly be interesting to watch and give us a lot to do. William Longinus, thank you.
Well, the Navy is helping out in a frantic search for survivors after an oil tanker collides with another vessel. The fire raising fears of a larger environmental disaster as well. And President Trump taking a tough stand on immigration. Can he and the Democrats make a deal to protect the dreamers? And will the president's demands be met?
We want to solve this problem, but most importantly, we don't want to have to deal with this problem in the future. So you've got to have border security. You've got to deal with chain migration. And it's a place that everybody could find common ground and solve.
The United States Navy joining the search for more than 30 crew members missing from an Iranian oil tanker. That ship colliding with another freighter and catching fire off China in the East China Sea. Smoke and weather are complicating the search for survivors. Benjamin Hall following this story from London. Benjamin?
Yeah, hi, John. There are now real fears that this tanker, which is carrying a very flammable kind of oil from Iran, could explode and that it could then sink. And if that were to happen, that would make this the worst tanker oil spill in over 25 years anywhere in the world. The Panamanian registered ship called Sanchi was sailing from Iran to South Korea, and it was carrying 136,000 tons, around 1 million barrels worth of oil condensate. That's an ultra-light form of crude oil. It's mostly transparent and it's far more explosive than normal crude oil. The tanker collided with a cargo ship which was carrying grain from the US, about 160 nautical miles offshore to the east of Shanghai on Saturday evening. The US Navy has now joined the search, sending a P-8A aircraft to help look for the missing sailors, and Chinese authorities have dispatched police vessels and 3 cleaning ships to help. It's now presumed the tanker's entire crew of 32, including 30 Iranians and 2 Bangladeshis, is dead. 1 body has been recovered from aboard the tanker. The crew of the cargo ship, though, have all been rescued. Experts are now trying to bring the fire under control and contain the leaking oil, but there are growing concerns that marine life in the area is at risk. But at the moment, there is the fire and the poisonous gases, and those are making recovery of any more bodies very, very difficult. And of course, as you said, there are very high seas in this area, which is making it impossible for ships to get too close by. And of course, remember, these high seas have been responsible for other collisions in the naval area down there as well, not least the US warships, which we've seen colliding in recent months. So a dangerous place to be down there at the moment, and the recovery is still ongoing. John?
Scary, scary situation. Benjamin Hall, live from London. Thank you. Melissa?
President Trump says he hopes to make a deal with Democrats on immigration. This weekend at Camp David, the president laid out his demands for any deal that protects so-called dreamers.
We want the wall. The wall's going to happen or we're not going to have DACA. We want to get migration, very important. And we want to get rid of the lottery system. In addition to that, we want some money for funding. We need some additional border security. When somebody gets picked in the lottery, we're not getting the best people. So we have to get rid of the lottery system. We have to get rid of chain migration.
Joining me now, Richard Fowler, radio talk show host and Fox News contributor, and Lawrence Jones, a Blaze TV and radio host and conservative commentator. Now that we straighten that out, Lawrence, I'll let you go first. What do you think can actually get done here on DACA? And I don't want talking points. I think Republicans want to get something done. What would that look like and include?
What has to be included first is that we get border security. That the base won't hear anything else until we get border security as a promise first. And then, Melissa, I think that we can talk about the Dreamers staying here. I don't know if that guarantees citizenship, because I believe a lot of people wouldn't be too happy with that. But I think if the Democrats can simply agree to the wall and border security, then we can talk about the Dreamers. If we don't get that, then this conversation is dead on arrival.
Yeah. Okay, so Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy, who you saw standing behind President Trump there, doesn't think necessarily you need Democrats on board. Let's hear that. And Richard, I'll ask you to respond after that.
I've never seen this party as united as we are. Think about this. The Democrats are whipping Nancy Pelosi on the floor to shut the government down. Right. Republicans passed it on their own, got to the 218, just Republicans to move this government forward while they're trying to play politics. And think about what we just did on tax reform. It's been 3 decades. You had to have the House and the Senate. And that was mainly, I had a lot of Democrats come to me and say they wanted to vote for that bill, but they were getting whipped from the Democrats' leadership to vote no.
So, Richard, what do you think? I mean, if you were giving advice to Republicans, would you say just try and get your own team on board and don't worry